Good evening, parents. Thank you so much for joining us for our December edition of Wellness Wednesday. We're going to give our participants another 2 minutes or so to come in and get themselves situated, and then we will get started. Good evening, parents and guardians, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us this evening. We are so excited about the program that we have for you and the rich discussion that we will have for you as we are going to explore navigating throughout the holiday. Welcome again to our Wellness Wednesday, to our December Wellness Wednesday workshop. And without further ado, I am Doreen Hogans. I'm Supervisor of School Counseling, and I'm here with my esteemed colleagues. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Miss Emily Pasco, who is our Mental Health Coordinator. Emily, it's all yours.
Hi, sorry about that. We had to exchange host capabilities to get the interpreters assigned to rooms, so I was not able to unmute myself. But thank you so much, Doreen, for the introduction, and thank you all parents for being here. We are here to provide you information and resources on grief and holiday stress, as we know those can both be difficult topics during the holidays. We do have interpretation available. So let me share my screen so that we can show you how to access that service. Here we go. Okay. And thank you to our Board of Education for allowing us to host this important topic discussion. And here we go. I'll hand it over to Jocelyn so she can explain the interpretation.
Hola, muchas gracias a todos por estar con nosotros este día para el Salud Miércoles en nuestro taller. Así que enfrente de ustedes están las instrucciones en cómo acceder los servicios de interpretación simultáneo. Para la interpretación simultánea, por favor, clique el globo en la parte de abajo donde dice interpretación y escoja el idioma que está necesitando.
Thank you. So one thing I want to say before we get started on this topic is grief can obviously be a difficult topic to think about, to hear about, and to discuss. So just be sure to monitor your own reactions to information that is shared and strategies. And we understand if you need to step away, if you can't be fully present and need to leave, that's fine. The most important thing is that you take care of yourselves and what's best for you in the moment. This webinar is being recorded, so you can always look back and access it at a later time if it's difficult for you to hear this information tonight. So take care of yourselves. It's really the main thing here. So our objectives tonight are to do an overview of grief, what it is not, talk about some coping strategies, and also discuss holiday stress and tips to manage holiday stress as well. And also to share resources that you can use after the webinar. So starting with some misconceptions about grief. So one of the biggest misconception about grief is that it's an emotion, when really it's a much more complex process consisting of many different emotions. And these can range from, obviously, sadness is the first one that we associate with grief, but also anger, frustration, possible survivor's guilt, or guilt about something we did or didn't do when the person was alive, shock, numbness, and even a sense of relief sometimes, especially if you are a caregiver to someone and you've seen them suffer. There might be some relief that they are in a better place, or that your time is a little bit freed up to do other things. So it's not really, that piece isn't discussed as much, but it is a very common reaction to someone's passing. So another purpose of this webinar is to normalize all the feelings that are associated with grief, because it's a process that's different for everyone and it's different depending on the day. So really to normalize some things and to clear up some misconceptions about what people think grief might be or should look like, when there really is no should when we're dealing with grief. Another misconception is that grief progresses in set stages. So most people know that there are 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. And where this really originated was a psychologist named Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she had famous work regarding terminally ill patients coping with their illness and their own mortality. So she really created these stages for people who were experiencing terminal illness rather than those who were grieving someone else's passing. So that's where that misconception comes from, where all of these things are still common in grief when someone dies, but it's a lot messier than that. You can feel angry, you can feel all of these in one day, or you might fluctuate 1 month from 6 months later. So really, it's not as neat as a lot of people and organizations make it seem. It can be very messy, and certain things can trigger big feelings like anger and depression, and other times you might be doing okay. So that's all very normal, and it's not necessarily in those set stages that we hear so much about. Another misconception is that grief follows a set timeline. When really grief lasts for a person's entire lifetime. When we lose someone that we love, that grief process never really goes away. The pain lessens over time generally, and we learn how to adapt to our lives without that person. But it really never goes away because we never forget about that person and the connection that we had with them. So it's very common if you're still thinking about a loss several years later. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, or that there's something wrong with your child if they're still talking about a loss. It's very common, and it is a process that is a lifelong process. Another misconception is that grief applies only to death, when really the grief process can be triggered by any type of loss. So the loss of a relationship, a job, a home, or an important life role can also be a trigger for grief, the grief process. And a lot of similar feelings come with all of those losses. I want to talk quickly about traumatic grief as well. So this is kind of a different type of grief. It's a reaction to a traumatic event, and it lasts longer than is typical. So a traumatic event might be something involving community violence, something that's very unexpected. And a lot of deaths during the pandemic can fall under this traumatic event and trigger traumatic grief, because no one really expected the global pandemic to happen. And it happened very quickly, and a lot of grief has been experienced through that. So I think we will see traumatic grief rise over the next couple of years as people continue to grapple with the losses from COVID-19, as well as increases in community violence and suicide. And the main difference in traumatic grief is it lasts longer than is typical. I say typical, there's a wide range of typical, but with grief specifically, about 6 months to a year, people tend to feel a little bit better. The pain is lessened and they're able to adapt to their daily lives without the person. In traumatic grief, that lasts much longer than a year. And this is when it might be a good idea to pursue some type of counseling, some type of professional help to deal with traumatic grief, because it's a different process. It's a similar process, but it's more difficult to deal with on your own because of the unexpectedness and because of the trauma associated with it. It often affects the person more deeply. So when is it time to seek help? So a lot of people who grieve might not need to seek professional counseling. Grief is universal. We have many supports in our family and our community, coping skills to deal with grief, but we really want to consider seeking professional help when the severity of the grief is significant and it affects our ability to function in one or more major life areas, whether that's for students, academic, socializing with peers, family relationships, our eating habits, or sleep. So those are the main areas that might indicate that it's a good idea to seek professional help. And we'll talk more about how to access that professional help as well. Grieving during the holidays can sometimes have more specific implications, because there's an expectation to be thankful and to be merry, when really we might just not be feeling it because we're really still grappling with the loss of that family member. And there are also themes of family and togetherness that might make it significantly harder to enjoy the holiday if those family members are not present. And it's just really a constant reminder of that loss and the fact that they are not present in that holiday. So also changing of rituals and traditions. So maybe the person who has passed had a key role in the holidays and in the holiday events that they are not able to take on any longer. So that might be significant as well. Also, I want to point out, grief and gratitude are not mutually exclusive. You can be feeling grief while also feeling grateful for the family and the friends that you do have, and for the things that are positive in your life. And that doesn't negate from your grief, and vice versa. So I know a lot of people think and want things to be in clean little boxes, when really grief just doesn't work like that. So it is very possible and common to have mixed feelings during the holidays as well. And that's what kind of makes it so hard during the holidays. Some strategies to cope through the holidays if you're dealing with grief, or if you have a child who's dealing with grief, might be to start a new tradition. Maybe start a new tradition that's honoring that person, changing the celebration in a way that involves the person who passed, and also expressing your needs. So you might not be in a place where you want to do all of the things that are typical of your family. Maybe your family gets together in a big way over the holidays, and that's just really not something that you're feeling this year. It's really important to express your needs, and a script for that can be, I'm just really struggling this year with the loss. I know that you all are ready to get back to the celebration, but I'm just not there yet. I would love to have maybe a lunch with you one-on-one. It's so also emphasizing things that you are capable of doing emotionally and physically, and doing those things, but recognizing when things are becoming too much for you and expressing those needs. Also, a great thing to do during the holidays is helping somebody else. It both takes your mind off of the loss and it makes you feel better. And an idea for that might be to donate to a cause that might have been significant to the person who had passed, or volunteering in your community. So helping someone else can be very therapeutic in the grief process. And just remember to give yourself time too. We know it's very difficult, and it's not an easy process. And like we said before, it's a lifelong process. So give yourself some time, especially if it's the first holiday without the loved one. Just recognize that it will be hard, and the things that you can do to make it a little bit easier on yourself, and give yourself some grace and some time to do that. And some specific ways that we can support children during grief. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but some of the things that you can say are just express that you care about them, that you're here for them. They're not alone in dealing with the grief, and that their family is there to support them through it, or their friends. That you are not going to leave them, that they do have that sense of stability in their lives. Expressing sorry that they're hurting, and you're offering to help however you can, and just recognizing that your child has that grief and is carrying that with them, and that you see that, and that they're important to you and loved, and that you are going to support them through that. And in saying all of these things, you can also admit to your own grief too. You can say, I know I really, really miss that person as well. We're going to get through this together. I'm going to be here for you. And really, you expressing your own feelings about the grief and about the person can also be very validating for your child as well. So not something to necessarily to shy away from. Okay, so holiday stress, that was our second big topic, and we are going to circle back to grief. We have a panel discussion following the presentation. So we are going to come back and to talk more in detail about some of these things. So holiday stress. So you are not alone in your holiday stress if that's something that you're feeling. There have been several studies that show that many Americans find that their stress increases over the holidays. And especially individuals with a pre-existing mental illness, they feel their conditions worsen around the holidays for various reasons. So you are not alone in that holiday stress, but there are things that you can take on and things that you can let go. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So some common causes of holiday stress are lack of money for gifts, lack of time to shop and cook and prepare in general. Also the safety and health of in-person gatherings. So we know that, COVID cases are fluctuating, and constantly having to take stock of what is a safe choice and what might not be a good idea is frankly exhausting, especially around the holidays when there might be pressure from other family members to do things or to not do things. So those decisions are hard and they really weigh on people. So I wanted to recognize that. And that's a theme in the holiday stress literature as well. And also pressure for holidays to be perfect for our families. We all want the holidays to be all that magic that we see on TV. So that can really put a lot of pressure on us. Some other things are, it's harder if you are someone who is concerned about diet. It's a lot harder to do that around the holidays. It's harder to get ourselves moving, maybe to the extent that we did before the holidays. So those are difficult things as well. So some ways to manage holiday stress are to set intentions, so you can really think about what's important for you and your family, and set those priorities. So knowing your stressors as well. So maybe you have a family member who consistently bails on an event or brings some drama to the event. Just knowing that might happen and using strategies to either prevent that or to prepare yourself emotionally for how you will react to that. So knowing your specific stressors so that you can get ahead of those and you can really brainstorm how you can address those. Practicing gratitude as well. So remembering the things that we are grateful for. Is an evidence-based strategy to manage stress in general, and definitely over the holidays as well. Also setting healthy boundaries, and I know that's easier said than done with families, but setting healthy boundaries, and there's some examples of scripts that you can use if there's any kind of pressure from your family or friends to do things that you do not think are healthy for you, to make sure that you are taking care of yourself first, because you can't take care of anyone else until you are mentally and emotionally healthy. So setting those boundaries and keeping those is a very important way to manage that stress. And also finding an outlet for stress, whatever works for you, whether that's journaling, whether that's running, exercising, making something, preparing food, or some type of creative hobby. Just really finding time to focus on you and what the best outlet of stress for you is. And lastly, I know this is also way easier said than done, but prioritizing sleep and rest. So the more we put it off and the more we ignore sleep and rest, the more it catches up to us and the more significant problems are going to be. So really prioritizing sleep and rest. Okay, and then we have some resources as well. So this is a grief resource that we can also put in the chat. But there are a lot of clickable things here. So community resources, Roberta's House and Chesapeake Life Center are both organizations in the area. They both have offices in Prince George's County and other counties in Maryland as well. They specifically focus on grief groups and grief therapy and grief activities and events. So definitely check out those resources. There's also a book list for with different ages that might, and different specific types of grief as well, that you can look through to find what might be the best for you, as well as read alouds for children who are experiencing grief, different healing activities, how to help children and teens heal, crisis resources. These two are informational resources. What's Your Grief? They have specific information, again, on different types of grief, specific family members or parents who have lost a child or lost a parent or a partner or lost someone due to community violence, or non-death grieving processes as well. What's Your Grief and the Dougy Center both have really good resources for those informational resources. There's also a community directory with general behavioral health information, and the Willow House is another great organization. This one's particularly for staff of Prince George's County Public Schools, and the Employee Assistance Program information is located there, as well as a self-care sheet and a self-care plan. So we will make that available to you in the chat. Let me go back. Sorry, I'm going back to my other, here we go. And then this coping guide as well. So this might be a good thing, and I can put this in the chat as well, to print out if you're available to do so, if you're able to do so, and put somewhere if you're dealing with grief this holiday season, to remind yourself of the things that we've talked about today and the strategies that we've discussed. So some resources for you to be able to print and to have access to after this event is completed. Right, so we also have a panel discussion, and I'll be moderating that. So I will introduce, let me stop sharing my screen, but this is everybody that will be on the panel, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can see everybody. And we do have specific questions that we have, but if you have any other questions that you would like us to share and answer, please put those in the chat. You should be able to chat with the hosts, and we will see those. And if we have time, we can certainly answer those for you. So we have Erica Chandler. She's a school psychologist in Prince George's County on the line. We have, let's see, sorry, I'm just trying to go down the list. Doreen Hogan, school counseling supervisor. Maria Velasco, mental health clinician for Maryland Family Resources. And Lisa Larrabee, who's a mental health clinician for Maryland Family Resources. We also have Katrina Emerson. She's the Executive Director, Child and Family Therapist in District Heights Family and Youth Services Bureau. She had to step away for a minute, but she should be joining us shortly. So the first question that we have for our panelists is, should I bring up, if I'm a parent experiencing loss and my child is also experiencing loss, should I bring up the loss over holiday break? And if so, what's the best way to do that? That might be most helpful.
Thanks, Emily. Glad to be here. So I would say, first of all, I speak both as a school psychologist, but also a parent, and have many different roles, as we all do. But I also speak as somebody who has also had multiple losses, and some of those have been considered traumatic losses. Emily spoke to that. And so even with all that, to have apprehension or hesitation in bringing up the grief or bringing up the loss is very, very common. And it's really, regardless of the time of year or how long it's been from a loss, it's a common feeling to wonder or to be hesitant to bring it up. But I do want you to know it is okay to bring it up. And the truth is, people who are going through a loss are feeling that loss, whether you say it or not. As a parent, I think it's important to have a dialogue, an open dialogue with our kids about how they're feeling and what they're going through if there was a loss. Again, even if it was a while ago, it's important. So a lot of times the person grieving is feeling isolated, or they may be feeling they're experiencing that alone, and approaching or bringing that up may actually help them feel that there are people, remind them that there are people around, there are people that care. So it's okay. It's okay to bring it up. One of the other things too, I think, is, consider your role. And, we're obviously talking to parents, but, this applies if you have a colleague or another family member who has gone through something, just to consider your comfort level, but also to know it is okay. So one of the things too is we were talking about the break that's coming too. And I would say with the winter break, especially, I think it's a good idea, because a lot of people don't have access to the supports that they had. So again, our kids have their peers, they have some school supports in place as well. Again, thinking about our, colleagues and others, if there's a break in our daily routine, which often serves actually as a healthy outlet for us, we may then be missing some of those sources of support and that routine that sort of helps us with the coping process. So it's okay. And during the break, like I said, when those routines are maybe not there as much, a child's grief may be more observable, and it may be something that you want to address. In terms of bringing it up, so yes, it's okay. And I think it's important not to necessarily overthink it. Loss is something that we've all experienced. Like Emily said, it's not just to the death of a loved one or someone we know, but just loss in general. And it's important to think about what worked for you, think about what didn't, what comforted you. And, also feel free to ask, ask if not the person directly that you're maybe concerned about, but, ask a family member, ask, somebody close to them, a friend, even if you don't know the person directly who maybe, has passed, that I think reaching out to someone to say, okay, are there any cultural considerations I should have? Should I, where is this person in the process? Is it okay, do you think, for me to reach out? And again, so I think it's okay to ask those things. And, when reaching out, you can do that through a text, a phone call, an email, in person. You can do it by through gesture, even, offering something, of thinking of them, and those are all important things, just to say, I'm thinking of you, just to say, I'm here for you, is really important. And, in terms of, also, I think, nowadays we text so much. But I think that it's important. And one of the things I found very helpful, if you're texting somebody, to check on them. I always follow it with, I don't expect a reply back. So sometimes just letting somebody know that you're there can have a very big impact, and allowing that person to have that space, but also know, hey, I'm here for you. And then I think just knowing that, one size doesn't fit all, right? So we hear that a lot when we talk about grief. You really need to, consider the individual, consider, your role, like I said, and try to meet the person where they're at as well. And it could change. So we talked about the, grief process, and, at different points, someone's at a different place. And so it's important to adjust, but it's okay to bring it up, and it's okay to show and share your support of that person.
Thank you. Those are really great tips. I love those, and I'm going to use some for myself, because kind of jogged my memory there, in supporting others. So thank you so much, Erica, for that really thorough response. And I think that was very helpful. Also, the next one is, what are the signs or indicators of grief that we can look for in children or teens? So what are some of the things we might see, or want to look out for if we suspect that a child might be dealing with grief?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Emily, for that question. I think that, like we've stated here tonight, right, each child is unique in their way, in the way that they understand death, and as well as their response to grief. Their understanding is really influenced by their developmental level as well as their age. If we're thinking about a range of expected behaviors that we can see with grieving children, you can expect some children to cry 1 minute and then laugh or act silly the next. In some cases, children may act as if the death didn't happen, or believe that the family member is somehow still alive. They may express feelings of sadness on and off over a long period of time. They may act younger than they are. They may need more attention, more cuddling. If we're thinking about older children, we can see grief, like you mentioned earlier in the presentation, Emily, in changes in school performance or attendance, and as well as changes in their sleeping or eating habits. I think what it boils down to, what we're really looking for in terms of signs, are any behavior change that appear to be different than previous changes in behaviors for each specific child. And Emily, I think it's also worth noting that you may not see signs of grief immediately following a loss, especially with younger children, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to grieve later on. You touched on traumatic grief earlier, so I won't go into the signs and things to look out for that, in the hopes of not being repetitive. But I do want to highlight that there is really no one way for a child to grieve, and that what we're really looking for is any major changes in behavior.
Thank you. So another question might be, how do we help kids who we have now identified that they are going through grief, and they are expressing or showing behavioral changes? How do we help kids navigate that grief of the loss of a family member or of an important person in their life over the holidays?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I really liked how grief was presented tonight, right? It's an ongoing process. It is not an emotion that's one of the
biggest misconceptions that we have to get out there. It's not easy for an adult to deal with their own grief, and also on top of that, to help a child navigate that grief. You know, for children, holidays can be really confusing. On top of dealing with their own grief, they may not know how to deal with the grief of the adults around them, and they're absorbing all of that emotion and energy. They also are still very likely to experience some excitement around the holidays despite their grief, which could cause them to feel guilt or shame, right? We know that holidays can be an especially difficult time for a family that has experienced loss. Holidays are, you know, filled with family gatherings, activities, traditions, memories that really serve to magnify our loss. And it makes it hard for us to support our children during this time. And I think that you mentioned some really good ways to support our children and to support ourselves as well, right? I think that the number one thing that we can do that's easy is we can listen. You mentioned that as well, right? It's simple, it's effective, it's really important. Kids need to know that they have someone to talk to who cares about what they're going through. Another thing we can do is we can allow children to be open and honest about their feelings, which can in turn help them understand and cope with their grief. We can practice patience. I say that for myself as well, like both for ourselves and with our children, right? I think that the holiday stress can also make it really hard for us to practice patience and to keep that at the forefront of our minds. You know, the feelings and the expectations that we put on holidays can change, and we have to be okay with being flexible if they do so. I think another really important one is we can ask them how they want to celebrate the holiday now that the things have changed with the loss. And you touched on this during the presentation as well. You know, some family traditions may be too difficult to manage. So coming up with conversations around which traditions they think should be kept and then which traditions should be put on hold. So not necessarily discarded, but put on hold for the time being. And then alongside with that, you know, creating new traditions. How would your child and how would you like to celebrate or honor the memory of the person that you lost, right? One of the things that comes to mind is maybe lighting a candle or having a special memory tree with some ornaments to commemorate and honor the person that we lost. I think something that's also important is to encourage children to have fun during this time of the year, even if it doesn't feel genuine for us. It's important that even through grief, children can continue to be children, and finding ways to lighten the mood, encouraging laughter, encouraging play, and reminding children very openly that it is okay to find joy in the holidays, even after a loss. And then lastly, we also talked about this earlier, right? It's really important for us to take care of ourselves. If we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care and support anybody around us. And along with that, you know, your child will look to you to see how to deal with their feelings. You're going to be the number one person, the model that they're going to look to learn how to deal and cope. So it's important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're talking about your feelings as well in an age-appropriate way with your child.
Thank you, Maria. That was perfect timing because I noticed there was a question in the chat on this topic, if it was, you know, normal to stifle your own grief to protect your children. And I would say normal, yes, I think it's very common, but that's going to catch up with you. So we can't put off dealing with grief. It does not go away. It has to be something that's dealt with. I know, you know, as parents, our first thing we want to do is protect our children. But unfortunately, grief is a universal experience. They are going to experience it more. So they really do look to us, but it's at the same time, it's okay to say, you know, I'm really struggling here too. It's really hard for me. And that can be very powerful for them to hear you label your own emotion, talk about what you're going through and say, we will get through this together. So I think it is very common to want to push it aside and want to be strong for our kids, but it does catch up to us. So thank you for that question, because I think that's a very important piece to highlight. And I'm sending you so much love in dealing with that this holiday season and for all the days to come. Another question. So I know Maria talked a little bit about this, but I would love to hear if anyone has any other suggestions on ways that we can honor a loved one, whether it's in the holiday season or any other way through any other time of year. What are some ideas for how we can honor someone who has passed?
I think we touched on, some of them, and it also crossed over to some of the things you shared, Emily, I think about some of the coping strategies. We help others and we do for, or give back that also in turn helps ourselves. So, there are many different ways you can honor a loved one. It may be through, supporting a cause close to them. It may be, donating, or it may be, doing something like facilitating like a drive or something like that. But also, you can also, as a family, talk about what you can do to continue traditions that maybe were most associated with that person, and continuing that is a way to honor them. I sort of have a funny anecdotal thing here. When my brother passed, he used to always give my daughter pajamas for her birthday. And they were like always just these character filled. I wasn't a big fan of those, but that's what he always did. And we knew that's what she was going to get on her birthday. So I made the decision to carry that on for my child. And so every birthday I go and get some over the top pajama, no matter how old she is. She's 11 now. And that's, how I honor that tradition that he was starting with her. Other things you can do, go for a hike, do something that they love to do. If they love to read, I mean, you could make a new tradition of picking a new book to read at that, anniversary or at that time. You can, we talked about starting new traditions. Another thing you can do is there are you can get a star named after people. I've actually done that on 2 occasions. There's just different ways that we can honor them, and it can be, small or large things, but it can, it's really personal and individualized again. And, just thinking about what that person loved and maybe how you can carry that on. Random acts of kindness, again, it's just a way to honor them and continue their memory and legacy.
Thank you. I love those PJs. That's a really cute answer. Thank you for sharing. So another question, how do I handle the feeling of guilt in celebrating during the holidays? Any suggestions for dealing with feelings of guilt and maybe celebrations?
Thank you, Emily. You touched on a lot of different ways that guilt can play out. You might feel guilty because you're still alive and the other person isn't. You might feel guilty because you're actually enjoying the holidays, but you feel like you shouldn't be because the other person isn't there, and maybe you feel like it's not appropriate or you're not honoring them. There also might be guilt or regret. Maybe there was some unfinished business with you and the deceased, or maybe there was something you wish you had said or wish you had done differently. I think first it's important just to acknowledge that you feel guilty. It's easy for an outsider to say don't feel guilty, but if it's there, right? And so just acknowledge it. Look at what's causing it. Sometimes there might be something to regret, right? Like if the last thing you said to the person was, I hate you, maybe you regret that, right? And I'm not trying to make light of that. It's something that happens. It's horrible. It's not our true selves. It doesn't represent how we feel about the person, but there might be something you really feel bad about. If that's the case, there might be different ways to address that. One thing that a lot of people like is to write a letter to the deceased. And now, of course, they're not going to send it, but just writing a therapeutic letter like, Dear show. I really wish my last words were that I loved you. You did so much for me. This is what I appreciate about you. You know, and getting those feelings out. If you believe in an afterlife and it's part of your religious system, you could do some sort of prayer or incense or, you know, whatever your faith system is. If you don't have that, it can still be very beneficial to get those feelings out so they're not just, you know, kind of sitting and eating away at you. Also talking about it with someone who's supportive, someone who's not judgmental, you know, someone who can really hear what you're saying and support you and validate that, you know, we all have regrets in any relationship. It's not that unusual. You know, we're human, we make mistakes, we, you know, all kinds of things. If you're feeling more guilt about moving on or starting to move on, I love what Erica said, like, how can you make them part of your movement forward? You know, can you do something to honor them? I had a friend who passed away that used to like to go out for tea with me, and he always got lemon tea. So when I wanted to think about him, I'd get a cup of lemon tea. You know, how do you hold on to those little pieces, and how do you make them part of your moving forward so you don't feel like it's two separate tracks? I think those were the main things I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Another question we had in the chat was, what do you say or do to help a coworker grieving the loss of a son? And I hope some of the information that was shared in the previous questions gave you some ideas on how to talk about that and how to address that. And strategies, but if not, I will also just say it might be worth exploring if your job has a employee assistance program. Some professions, I know PGCPS has the employee assistance program where people can access counseling services for free. So you might want to ask maybe your boss about that if you're comfortable with just exploring resources that are specific to the job and maybe that your friend or coworker might not know about. So just wanted to add that that's a benefit to some jobs, and really just being there for your coworker and not putting too much pressure on them to talk. But if they talk about it, that you have some strategies that you can use with them. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and I'm so sorry for your coworker, but it's really lovely that they have you really gaining information on how to support them. So I do commend you for that. Another question we have is, how can my family and I access support during the holiday break? So what kinds of things are available while schools are out that are available to them, and how can we access those?
That's a great question. And we are very fortunate in the state of Maryland that we have a system that is designed to support emergency crises, and not only with throughout the state of Maryland, but also right here in Prince George's County. We have several entities that are available, that are set up to support those individuals and those families in crisis as well. And I can actually drop some information in the chat, and hopefully you will be able to copy this information down, and you can always reach out to me or any member of the panel for additional support. But we have the crisis text line, which the number you can text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. We also have the Prince George's County Crisis Services, and that includes the mobile crisis team. And I worked extensively with them, especially during COVID when we were working virtually, but we still needed to support students who were in crisis. And they are very responsive and always willing and able to assist you and your families with whatever services you may need that has resulted in a crisis. And the number is listed there, 301-429-2185. We also have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which you can dial 988 from your phone, from your mobile phone, and it will connect you with a counselor who will be able to speak with you. Also, as I was stated, the state of Maryland has a 211 line where you could call to receive supportive services, and they will connect you with the appropriate agencies for any support that you may need while schools are closed. And last but not least, and I'm sorry that the font is a little mixed up, but you can text your zip code to 898211 to receive support as well. So we are very fortunate to have these resources available. And of course, in the event of an extreme emergency, please do not hesitate to call 911 because the 911 operators, of course, are 24/7, and they will be able to assist you as needed.
Okay.
Emily,
Yes.
I was going to add too, you know, I know you put it, I think, in the presentation, but definitely like Hospice of the Chesapeake and Roberta's house, right? You know, obviously you can refer back to that, but those two really stand out in terms of grief support, groups. Again, personally, I've been a part of their organization and professionally, and they are extremely good resources for kids, parents. You know, we think the hospice, but hospice does a whole lot, especially with traumatic loss, substance use, suicide, accident, things like that. So they are a great resource too.
Thank you. I also put in the chat the link to the visual that I showed, as well as a link to the Employees Assistance Program. If there are any PGCPS employees that are on the line, those services are free to any employee in the county, teacher, custodian, administrator, cafeteria worker, or anyone that is employed by PGCPS is eligible for these benefits. So I just dropped a link in the chat so you can log in and dial that number and get access to those. Okay, so moving on to holiday stress. So what are some tips for recognizing our stressors through the holidays, really anytime, but specific ones that might come up during the holidays?
Thank you. That's a great question. I would say, you know, a good way to identify your stressors is to notice when you're acting out of character. Like, when are you more irritable than normal? When are you avoiding things more than normal? When are you crankier than normal? When are you sadder than normal? A lot of time that can be a clue that there is you know, something that's triggering you or pushing your buttons. We all have some family we enjoy seeing. We all have some family that we wish we didn't have to see, but maybe we do have to see. You know, being mindful of taking care of yourself in those situations. You know, families are very good at pushing our buttons. People say they push our buttons because they made our buttons, right? And so being mindful of what your buttons are, like, are your buttons when people pick on your hair, like whatever your buttons are, you know, just being mindful of that and being prepared for that. And how do I get out of that situation quickly, and how do I decompress about that situation? And just being mindful of, you know, as already was expressed, being mindful of self-care. When you're hungry, you're more likely to be stressed. When you're tired, you're more likely to be stressed. And just that's going to happen. There are going to be times where you didn't get enough to eat. There are going to be times where you didn't sleep enough during the holidays. But how do you take care of that? How do you realize, okay, I am irritated right now. Maybe I need to take a break. Maybe I need to get some air. Maybe I need to drink a glass of water. Maybe I need to listen to music. You know, how do I take care when I am stressed? The other thing in the context of stress and grief is that you know, you might find yourself acting out of context. I had the year after my grandmother died, she had a good long life. She lived till she was 96, so I was very grateful to have her. But every holiday period, I would go to a tea party through an organization I'm involved in, and I would always call her afterwards. And the year she died was 2015, and I didn't want to go to the tea party. And it's something I always go to. It's the high point of my holidays, and I couldn't figure out why I didn't want to go to the tea party, but it was because I didn't want to feel sad that I couldn't call her. And once I realized that, I was able to process it and go to the holiday tea party, and then do something to honor my grandmother afterwards. So if you're finding yourself acting out of character, just dig into that a little bit and journal, talk to a friend, talk to a professional, but just look at it and why am I acting weird about this, or why am I acting irritable about this, and just take a step back and do something to honor those feelings.
Thank you so much. Another question we have, what can we do if we notice that our child is struggling with stress around the holidays? How can we support them through that?
So I'm feeling the best way to support youth experiencing those stressors, especially during the holidays, is helping them, one, to stick with their routines, incorporating exercise into their routines. The biggest thing is validating their feelings. I know it's the holiday time. I know it can be stressful for you, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, cousin, but being able to check in with them sometimes just to see, just because they're out of school doesn't mean that the issues that they're having in school stops. Whether it's, we have social media, so whatever happens during the school year and they go out on break, that continues right along with their day-to-day activities. And of course, they have more access to their phones because they're no longer in school and they don't have other distractions with schoolwork and those kinds of things. Having children focus on their healthy habits, eating, drinking, getting enough sleep. Sometimes they oversleep and sometimes they don't sleep enough, but making sure that they do have that balance, making room for downtime, eliminating that social media, finding activities that they can do as a family, building that family engagement during the holidays will actually strengthen their relationships and actually strengthen that process of moving through, if they are dealing with grief or if they're dealing with stress, playing games, board games with family members, video games. Some of them are healthy, some of them can actually be stressful, but being mindful of that, and then understanding that kids, teens can also engage in self-care as much as adults do. Even if it's doing something as, progressive relaxation, doing the deep breathing, teaching the family members how to do deep breathing. If the kid knows how to do it and they learned it at school, teach the whole family. I think that it's definitely helpful for everyone because it's something that you can do and nobody has to know. And so it's a great tool that you can take with you wherever you go. But I think focusing on those things and making sure that your home is a safe place in ways that it reduces that stress level so that everybody comes in and everybody works together to keep that peace and keep that healthy environment going, then it makes it easier for them to eliminate the stress or minimize some of the stresses that they're experiencing at school or outside the home.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you so much. I'll also just add that for Prince George's County Public Schools, we do have mental health days. Each student can use one mental health day, and Doreen, correct me if I'm wrong, per semester, correct? So a mental health, go ahead. Yes, it could be a great way for you to connect with your child during a mental health day and really just involve them in the decision. What do you think that you need to kind of get back to closer to baseline? Do we need to go for a run or do some exercise? Do we want to go to a special place together? Do we want to just veg out for a day? So really just making sure that you all know that those are available, and they're there for a reason, because we know that students are under a lot of stress these days. So making sure that is a resource that you are all aware of. Another question might be, so what are some ways to avoid or navigate family disputes or arguments around family gatherings during the holidays? I know that's a tough one.
Yeah, that was just mentioned, family can bring out the best and they can bring out the worst in us sometimes. But we mentioned this earlier, boundaries, establishing what those are and what they're going to look like, and planning ahead. I actually thought of some pretty practical things you can do if maybe you have difficulty with one particular family member who may be around. And one I would say is in general is you cannot control what they say or do, but you can right? But you can control how you respond to it. So focus more on what you think you can do, or than what they can change, let's say. It's important to maybe identify any of those triggers that you know exist between you and the other family member, and then think about other ways you might be able to respond. Some practical things, like I said, take a break from, the room where that individual is in. Maybe you're at a gathering and there's a pet, you can offer to walk the dog. Go on a walk, have music playing. So maybe there's a little less dialogue and chance for those things to happen. And set even like a time limit, in not actually a timer, but, in your own mind, and then shift at another point, or transition to another person, or transition to another room. And another one, I can't think of the movie right now, but you could even have with a family member, your spouse, somebody who's at the event, let's say with you, you could identify sort of like a word, if you need to, that maybe that kind of notifies that person, hey, help me transition to another conversation or another room, or, and sometimes it's also setting a few minutes aside to go check in maybe with that person and just like vent or process what you need to, and then return. And I think that, all of those things can help you avoid those things. And again, just knowing what the boundaries are that you want to set, stick to them, and plan ahead for how, you can make that happen.
I love the code word. That's great. I know in my family, when it's time to leave, my dad and I look at each other and we go like this. That's our signal.
Oh,
So
I like
maybe a
that.
nonverbal could work too for family disputes.
Absolutely.
So what can we do if a family member is withdrawing? If we notice that someone's withdrawing during the holidays, what are some things that we can do?
Yeah, I think this is a really complicated question to answer. I do think that sometimes people just need space, and they need people around them to provide that space, right? Everyone getting together, and we've talked about tonight over the holidays, is inherently stressful. I do think that what can be helpful in these situations when a family member does withdraw is to provide steady, unconditional support to that family member who's withdrawing. I think grief and depression, and then just the inherent stress of the holidays, can cause people to withdraw and make them feel isolated and lonely. And being able to do small things like, calling or texting. I think it was Erica that mentioned that earlier, right? Doing small things, dropping by, can show them that they're not alone, and that you're there to offer support when they're able and ready to accept it. I think it's important for a family member who withdraws to be feeling encouraged to join when they are ready. And I think that a really good way to go about this is to have someone from that family that the family member connects well with. It can be outside of the family, right? But someone that the family member connects really well with, check in on them without pressuring them, can be helpful, right? Not everybody going to them at once. That can be really stressful and can cause them to withdraw further. I think I'd also like to note, for us to remember, right, that asking for help is a sign of strength. And so gently encouraging that family member to ask for help if and when needed, while also looking out for those concerning behaviors that may let us know that they may benefit from some professional help. The bottom line here is, be available, provide a non-judgmental, safe space when they are ready to join back in.
Thank you. Another question we have is, what are some ways to manage financial stress during the holidays? I know we talked about that a little bit, but if we could have some strategies, maybe.
Absolutely. And we all want that magical Christmas that we see on TV, and we all want to to give our loved ones and our children that gift that's going to send them that's going to send them back to school bragging about how wonderful and amazing and awesome their parents are, right? But sometimes we have to ensure that we are sticking to our budget and that we are taking a deep look at our finances. And even though we know that that one item is going to bring such a huge smile to our dear family or our children's faces, are we going to be regretting it the other 11 months out the year? And so we have a tendency to, even though, especially when we're in holiday burnout or we're in holiday grief, we do have a tendency to reach into our pocketbooks and hand over the credit card because it makes us feel better. But is that the healthiest thing to do? No, because we still have responsibilities and we still need savings for the 11 months out the year. And full disclosure, I am listening to myself speak and like, yep, I need to take that advice because there are times that I have found myself to be an emotional spender. There are times as a widowed mother of two that I found myself overcompensating to make sure that my children, my two daughters, have, everything that they would have had if they were in a two-parent household. But I'm a work in progress, and I'm learning to make sure that that it's controlled. And so some research and some self-care and some self-help that I have sought is number one, have a plan and stick to your plan and make sure that you let your plan be widely known. So you let your family members and you let your friends know, and your children know what your plan is, what you're going to do, and how much you're going to spend or have budgeted for over the holiday season. And also maybe talk to someone else who has had the same challenges or in the same position, or an older family member who went through a similar situation, and how did they manage and maintain to stay on budget and stay on track, especially throughout the holiday season. And then you can also, we should always focus on the reason for the season, whether it be of a religious emphasis to you, whether it be just the sharing concept or the giving concept. That's what the reason for the season is: family time or time just to or just to relax and sit and watch the snow that we may get, right? Or just decompress as we get ready to welcome in a new year. So that's important to keep in mind. Also, homemade gifts, for those of you who may be a little crafty, are delightful. And you can always Google or YouTube or look for some ideas about a creative gift. I would love a poem or a story, or something that comes from the heart, that was made from home, based upon whatever unique talents that you may have. Also, you can make your gifts. You can also give your time. And this, a family activity could be donating, volunteering at a homeless shelter, or volunteering at your local place of worship, or volunteering at a school, or just doing something that's service-based, and give your time for the needy. Maybe pick up some blankets and drop them off at a senior citizen home, or some type of service activity that is giving as well, or using that mental health day, even though we only have a few days left in the school year, but using that mental health day for yourself, taking one from your employment if you can, and spending it and allowing your scholar to take their mental health day and spend it doing some nice, unique things that the two of you agreed on. That's a wonderful gift that I'm sure your scholar will enjoy. Perhaps take advantage of technology, and you can send an email, maybe send an email to those long lost friends or family members that you have not communicated over with in some time. Or we're, of course, in an Instagram-able society. So long are the days where we may have sat down and written a lengthy email or a letter to a loved one, to a family member. Maybe write a letter to your child, letting them know how proud you are of them, of the things that they have accomplished over the past school year or over the past year or so. That could be a heartfelt sentiment as well. And finally, you may want to use your phones and take some pictures and make a scrapbook or try to gather some scrapbooks try to gather some pictures that you may have never printed or never posted on social media, and make a scrapbook for your loved ones, for your families, for your children, so they can reflect on. And that's something that they may be able to take with them as they transition to college and move out the house, and just always remember that you took the time out to create this very unique gift to give to them. So always remember that when we are making our Christmas list, and that we are scratching out our marking off the to-do list and all the shopping, and to try to remember that December is December, but we also have January through November to live, and we have our expenses, and we're not going to give because we feel guilty, but we give because we have the heart to do so, and try to put lots of time and energy into creating a meaningful holiday celebration that's not focused on expenses.
Thank you. I love those ideas. So we are pretty close to being out of time. We actually made it through all of our questions that we had, and I think we got most of the questions in the chat. If you had any other questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I also just wanted to give everyone a reminder about the surveys that were posted in the chat, and I'll post those again. These are really important. They inform. We're going to continue to do Wellness Wednesdays. So we want to hear from you about what topics are relevant, what you want to hear about, and what you want discussed. So your feedback is very, very valuable to us. So we would appreciate if you both would just tell us how you thought this event was, any suggestions for future events. So those can be captured in those surveys. Also, this is being recorded, and it will be posted on the PGCPS YouTube page that I just put in the chat. So if you know someone who wanted to attend but weren't able to, please remind them that it is recorded and that it is accessible to them, especially if you thought that this was useful. Please share it, and please feel free to share the resources that we shared. And we thank you all so much for your time, and we are wishing you all the best in the holiday season, over winter break, and in the new year. So thank you all so much, and look out for more Wellness Wednesdays. Thanks.